But if I really wanted to learn and grow and advance, I need to see folks that are successful or folks that have reached some level um, of perceived meaning either for them or from a general perspective. What did they do?
Welcome to the Rebase Show, the place for profession with purpose, the show where we are here to equip you with everything that you need to create more success and more fulfillment in your career and in your life. And with today's show, I want to promise you, you don't need to adjust your speakers. You don't need to adjust your TV set. You don't need to adjust your phone in case it feels like you're seeing double or hearing double. And like, you're hearing the same thing back and forth. I promise you that the guest we have today is not my clone, and I'm not a clone of him. However, we do have a lot of similarities, and our paths have naturally come to meet here as we both seek to make work more meaningful. That's a key word for as many human beings as possible. And our guest today, I would do him a disservice by trying to provide a lengthy background. So I would just say that our guest today is the man who is helping to make work meaningful and helping to make meaningful work more popular. He is the host of the Late Afternoon Show, and he is Mr. Meaningful Work. Tim Olaore, how are you doing today? Welcome to the Rebase Show.
Man, I am trying to laugh quietly. Like, I don't know how that comes across as you're talking about. I was like, yeah, we're close. Like this, if you're seeing double, it's because we're twins. It's okay. Don't freak out. I'm over here trying to laugh podcast respectfully. I don't know. I don't know how to do that. But dude, I'm good, man. No.
That wasn't the goal. The goal was to get that reaction out of you, because we're basically the modern Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger over here.
Oh man, I am good, Sean. I'm happy to be on here chatting with you. I mean, we've had conversations in the past, and it's already a good time. So, dude, I'm lit. I'm hyped. Let's do it.
Fantastic. And again, I think it's really important for those folks who do get to see us interacting here that we have pretty distinctly different backgrounds, and we both have come to the same path, and this a very similar path at the very least, and a similar desire to help people get more meaning and more purpose and more fulfillment out of their work. So why don't we kick off by letting everybody know sort of how did you get to this point? You can go, backwards in time and reconstruct things, but like, how did you get to this point, and what is your story around becoming Mr. Meaningful Work? Please let us know.
Yeah, I have a bad habit of dabbling in more things than I normally should be. I am chronically unable to focus on one thing, and that might be the same for a lot of folks, a lot of entrepreneurs who just ideas come and you want to pursue it. And so I'd been doing that for a long time. And it kind of came to a point when in my most recent move, in my most recent job change, moving from LA up to the Sacramento area, it's a new city, it's a new job, it's a new environment. And I just really wanted to be more intentional about focusing. And I was asking myself the question, why is it that I'm always drawn into so many different directions? Even when I have a stable job, I'm out here hustling, trying to do all these different things. And, what is meaningful for me? I still want to have a personal brand. I still want to explore entrepreneurship. I still want to be able to provide for my family by way of a stable job and career. But I got to figure out what's meaningful for me. So it was in that whole journey and thinking about, what I should do. I just thought, I was like, you know what? That exploration can be the brand. Like me figuring out what meaningful work is for me, defining this kind of nebulous idea of meaningful work and making it more practical, making it more applicable. That could be the brand. Like, I'm not going to tout myself as a guru or anything like that, but I will take on the moniker of Mr. Meaningful Work from an accountability perspective. Like, hey, this is what he is pursuing. This is the journey that he's kind of putting it out there that folks can, because I want folks to hold me accountable to that. As like, it kind of forces me to be that person and to figure those things out. So that's kind of how it came to be. And I said it was kind of inspired by a friend of mine, Tim Olaore, who goes by Mr. Future of Work. And so we were kind of talking. And so the idea was like, hey, if I want to be known for something, and I want my name associated with a certain idea, I think meaningful work will be that. So I took that on and I just started pretty much just vlogging lessons learned from the previous week on, hey, this is what happened last week. This is how I think it applies to meaningful work this week. Just my own personal thoughts. And I called it Meaningful Monday to help folks kind of understand how to apply some of the actions and activities from the previous week, to their future week. And so I just kept on doing that for my own self. And then started to think that it would be good to ask other people as opposed to just asking myself and reflecting on myself on what meaningful work is. It would be good to get perspectives from other folks. And so I started calling on some of the folks that I knew in my network and asked them, what does meaningful work to mean to you? What is something that you are excited about? It started off as being called the RUFF, WRUFF, What Are You Famous For? Show. And then LinkedIn eventually granted me permission to do LinkedIn Live. And so I transitioned it from Instagram Live, where I was having these conversations with folks, to the LinkedIn Live platform. And then we switched the name to the Late Afternoon Show because I wanted to kind of follow the model of these late night shows of quirky jokes, corny jokes, interaction, games, and things like that. So it wasn't just your traditional talking heads on podcasts. But it was actually fun and interactive and things like that. And so that's how the Late Afternoon Show came to be. And we've just been trying to grow and develop ever since, man. A lot of things in the works, but that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, that is definitely what the Late Afternoon Show is, at least conveyed to me, is that it's, especially because you guys usually go live, I believe, on like Friday afternoons, or at least that's whenever I've caught you. And it is, at least for somebody like myself, towards the end of the week on a Friday, I don't necessarily want a bunch of talking heads and just like giving me like all just the facts, ma'am, right? Like I just all the facts and like very deadpan, and it's fun. It has very much has the feel of a late night show, which is exactly what people like, at least myself, need on a late Friday afternoon. There's a lot of there that I would love to dive into. And I first of all, I love that you recognized early on, you said, I'm going to provide my insights on what was meaningful for me on Monday, which I think is really valuable and brilliant timing on your part of like, Monday, I'm going to share with people what was meaningful for me, which that's usually not the time when we're thinking about meaning and purpose and this and that. This is usually the time when we're like, all right, what was this week going to be like, right? For a lot of people.
Brace yourself. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like we're just thinking, can I get through this week? Not like, what is my grander purpose? But also that you mentioned accountability, and you mentioned how you wanted to be accountable to the people who were looking to you. But I feel like you also took a lot of that accountability, not off yourself, but you spread it out to other people by saying, it's not just me. I'm going to look for other people and hear their voice, and I'm not going to be the guru, like you said. I'm going to be the person who investigates and finds these things out, so that people aren't just hearing my voice. It's something I've struggled with, here and there on the podcast. It's like just providing my perspective versus hearing all these other perspectives. So, what caused that shift in you to not just provide people with your perspective, but to want to go out and get the perspectives of other people? And maybe second question would be, what were some challenges once you made that decision and once you decided to go down that path? Because that's not a trivial path to go down, to say, now I'm going to share all the stories.
Yeah. So to your first question, as far as like, what was a catalyst for that shift? For me, one of my personal values is relationships. One of my strengths is learning agility. So kind of combining those two things, relationships and learning agility, being able to learn from all different types of situations and apply those learnings. But understanding that that comes from people. And so I could continue just kind of going in my own head and getting my own perspective. But if I really wanted to learn and grow and advance, I need to see folks that are successful or folks that have reached some level um, of perceived meaning, either for them or from a general perspective. What did they do? How did they view their work? How did they focus? How are they motivated? And things like that. And how can I learn? To be honest, it was selfish for me because I'm trying to learn so that I can improve my perspective on meaningful work. So when I'm asking these folks, I am taking their ideas, I'm taking their perspectives and their journey and seeing how I can apply it to my own to my own experience. And then what I found was that folks that were watching were also taking bits and pieces of things that apply to them. Not everything that I say is going to make sense for everybody that watches, but it might be one or two things or somebody else's perspective or the combination of my perspective and their perspective that kind of mix and make the perfect cocktail of meaningful work for somebody. And I started to see that. I saw the value in bringing those things in. And so over the years, I've been able to amass what I think is a pretty cool network of individuals. And I also love the process of making new connections, making cold calls, leveraging other connections to get new connections. So this was an avenue for that. I've been in sales for a long time. So like finding the people is something that really gives me energy. And so this was an excuse or an avenue to do that. And I had a platform that I could invite folks to talk about it. So it was just leaning into my values of relationships and agile learning, and getting and that's how I started like reaching out to folks to come on the show. And then I just needed to make it fun and exciting and different, and that was what the late afternoon show allowed for. The challenge.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can I ask real quick about a challenge or a potential challenge? And it sounds like you've been in sales, so you over the years maybe have developed this skill or this resilience or this I don't know what je ne sais quoi around selling to people, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't not say je ne sais quoi, which means I don't know what. So for somebody like myself, so I come from an engineering background, and I heard you say I really love the process of like selling to people and meeting people and connecting. That drains energy out of me, but it provides energy to you, which I think is really interesting. So was that always the case for you, or was connecting with people a skill you had to learn? I ask because my perspective is that the future of work involves a stronger community for everybody, and everybody having their own community of people that they can rely on. As maybe full-time work is a little bit less prevalent, or you're doing a bunch of gig work or freelance work. Being able to sell to people, being able to connect to people, having the courage to reach out to people seems like a skill set that needs to be developed in people who maybe like me. That's not a giver of energy; it's more of a taker of energy. So, has that always been the case for you, or?
For as long as I can, and I don't think I've ever been asked that question, in that way. So it's kind of causing me to think, which I appreciate. Growing up, we moved a lot. So I moved to the States when we were 5. When I was 5, my family moved to the States from Nigeria. And even in Nigeria for the first 5 years of my life, I moved like 3 or 4 times. My dad is a pastor. And so in the pastoral world, you have to, they're moving you from church to church and from area to area. And he was also pursuing his master's and his PhD. So he was going, he finished his master's here, and he had to go to another school. So we were always moving. And so that kind of forced us to create new relationships all the time as kids. Like we just had to constantly be engaging with new people all the time. So there was that. And then when I was in school and got out of school, some of the easiest jobs to get are sales jobs. Like if you're looking for an entry level, just kind of get in, some grunt work. Like sales jobs are always available. They're always hiring, whether it's over the phone or in person or what have you, door knockers, whatever. That's like the easiest job. And so getting into jobs like that where I'm selling knives door to door, whether I'm selling insurance, whether I'm selling Comcast subscriptions or what have you, there was always something where I had to be selling things. And so that built up a skill set of building rapport with people quickly, right? As a salesperson, they tell you, you got to be able to build rapport, find a point of connection quickly. And so, given my history of moving around a lot and always having to engage with new folks, and then the professional requirement of being able to build rapport and connect with folks, I think those two things combined really build up, call it the calluses. Like if you're playing guitar and you have to build up calluses, like you kind of build up that toughness where it's like, yeah, it's easy for me to connect with somebody. It's easy for me to pursue, understanding the sales pipeline of they're not going to probably buy on the first round, but you maintain and you just kind of drip with them, for a little bit, and you follow up, you'll eventually get that, sale or, at the end of the day. So for me, I love that pursuit. Like, what can I do to continue engaging with the person? What is of value to this person? How can I, structure my offering to meet, what their needs are? So that was kind of where it came for me.
There's a natural curiosity there, right?
You got to be curious. You got to be curious.
There's like a natural curiosity there.
You got to be curious.
Yeah, again, I'm going to interrupt you, so I apologize now, but I'm going to probably continue to interrupt you.
These are good.
But and I ask this a lot because, like, I came from a small town where there was a Army War College and there were military kids and a lot of people moving around a lot. And I think that there's a lot of that still, in the world where people have to move around a lot for various reasons. Do you think that because you had to move around a lot, do you think that made you more predisposed to or better at, right out of the gate, some of these sales jobs where you have to make connections and build relationships right out of the bat, right off the bat and right out of the gate? And again, I ask this because engineer, sometimes I don't even have to talk to the people I'm building stuff for, right? And build those relationships. But other people, it sounds like you had a childhood where you had to make new relationships really quick. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening or watching who see that as something they had to go through in their lives, and they don't necessarily see that as a skill and an asset. So do you think that was an asset to you whenever you went into these sales jobs?
100%. I think there was two factors. I think one was that of constantly being exposed to, new people and new interactions that made it easier to transition into a sales type of role where you have similar requirements. I think the other thing that a lot of folks are fearful of in sales is the fear of rejection, right? They don't want folks saying no all the time or more often than not. And for me, I think I built up some tolerance for that, because either tolerance or just maybe even an ambivalence to it, was that I was, from a very young age and then in kind of later elementary school, I was really encouraged to do things at my own pace and go at my own pace in my education. We were homeschooled for a little bit, so I was able to understand the concepts as quickly as I could, and then like skip ahead and go as fast, and go into advanced grades. And so for a very young age, I was in classes and grades with folks that were older than me. And so there was a lot of pressure there. So the fear of rejection or the fear of not looking good or looking cool or whatever was quickly taken away, because I was in this environment where I had to be very sure of who I was and what I was doing and understand what my pace was and going at that pace, which in sales, you have to be very sure of your pitch, of your product. And, when folks say no, you're not, feeling dejected or taking it personally, like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I'm committed to this goal and moving forward in that way. So I think those two things, the exposure to a lot of folks because we moved around a lot, and the ability to go at my own pace to reduce the fear of rejection, really helped out for my success in sales. And then anything else that I did afterwards, as far as like connecting with new people and getting guests on the show, really helped out.
I love that so much. And you mentioned like reducing the fear of rejection. And I think that we all have fear of rejection wherever we are. And sometimes rejection strikes you and it doesn't hurt you too bad, but other times it's really painful. But it almost sounds like you were able to just compartmentalize that rejection to, it's not me, it's maybe them, it's their decision, it's their reasoning, and it's not what I did. But then you also said, I'm looking forward to those follow-ups. I'm looking forward to figuring out how I can help that person, to how like I can fit in with that. And that's where, at least, for me, and I think for some other folks, that immediate rejection can be debilitating, or it could be something we can't quite put in the right perspective. But it sounds like you have a really good, healthy way of looking at it. It's like, I got rejected, which means no, but maybe it's just no for now.
Exactly.
And maybe it's not no because of me, it's no because of them or wherever they're at. What are some other things you've learned? And I don't want to make this like a sales podcast or talk about that, but honestly, in the future of work, quote unquote, people's ability to sell themselves, sell their ideas, sell their experience, sell their accomplishments is so important. And you're the type of person that not only are you digging into this world of what meaningful work really means and how people can find that meaningful work, but also helping people to determine, like one of the last episodes I saw of the Late Afternoon Show was when you were speaking with, and now the name of the company's going to leave me, actually, the founder of Loop, the co-founder
John
of Loop.
Henry,
John Henry, yes. And I watched that and I saw John was so sure of what he was doing. And I see you in the content that you're producing and the things that you're doing, and you seem very sure of what you're doing, regardless of what other people's comments might be, regardless of judgment. And even if it does get to you, but you don't project that. So I feel like there's just a lot of power in people being able to face rejection or even perceive rejection. And that's again, really powerful. So what are some things that you would recommend, or you've seen with people that you've talked with, because you've gotten all of this context from so many people now around, if you care about what you're doing, if you care about what you're selling, if it's you, if it's a company and you do get rejected, like what is some advice you would give to people when the thing you throw out there and you bare your soul and people are like, nah,
we don't want that.
Right? Because it happens, and it doesn't always happen directly. Sometimes it's like, nah. And they walk away, right? It's not direct. So, and that could be just as crushing. So what are some of the things maybe you've coached people on, or you've seen that can help people as they need to be able to sell their ideas better?
I think you mentioned it as you were in conversation, and it's also reminiscent of what, our favorite social media guru, Gary Vee, talks about all the time, which is context. Context is really helpful, especially when thinking about rejection. For me, if I'm reaching out to somebody, or if I'm trying to connect with somebody, whether it's in a sales call or in my regular job, in a stakeholder management, hey, I'm trying to get buy-in on this particular project or initiative, or trying to get somebody on the show, and there's not that immediate, yes, absolutely, we love this, and there's some resistance or, call it rejection, I think of the context of why. So they said no, or they're pushing back, and then I try to, from an empathetic mindset, think of why would they not want this now? And how do I reposition myself? Like, that's for me is the fun. Like, that's like the chase. Like, when you look at animals that are hunting and they're trying to strategize, like a lion is looking at a gazelle and say, okay, they're going to go that way, so I'm going to go this way to meet them. Like, that's the energizing piece for me is, okay, so they said no, and they said no now. Why? I'll give you an example. Jeff Hoffman, former Priceline of CEO, chairman of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. He was the first guest on my season 2. I've been chasing this guy for 6 years. 6 years I've been chasing this guy. And it was always about figuring out where he is, what is he doing? Do I need to email him at 5 o'clock in the morning? because his day is going to be super busy? Is he no longer at this organization? Like, where is he speaking at? What's important to him right now? And how do I position myself? And so it took a long time, but eventually what happened, what I was able to find out, that this global entrepreneurship network that he's a chairman of, and he does it with Pitbull and some of these other artists and stuff, is like, that is huge for him, like empowering communities that may not have access to resources to build up startups and technology and things like that's huge for him. So, and I'm an entrepreneur, so I love, like, that resonates with me. So it's not like I have to fake it. So I'm like, you know what? Let me help him in his global entrepreneurship work, right? So what can I do here locally in Sacramento to help progress this, Gen, they call it Gen for short, this Gen network. And so I reached out and say, hey, I want to be part of the Gen network and build up these things, and I want to help locally. And I was part of the task force down here. And so we built that up for a little bit. And then it was through that I was now able to say, hey, Jeff, we would love to have you on the late afternoon show. And it was an easy and almost immediate yes. And like within a few months, he was on the show. And so it was that context of thinking, how this other person is thinking, and how do you position yourself to be in a space that is in their sweeter spot, of the radar, and not taking it personally.
And comfortable for them, right? Comfortable for them.
Make it comfortable for them.
Yeah.
And so doing that work will help kind of reduce the sting of the rejection kind of at the moment, as you kind of broaden your mind to think of the more, the larger context of kind of where the aura that this person is living in, and how you can position yourself to be of value to them, given what's important to them, at that time. So that's kind of one thing that I do that I've found helpful.
That's fantastic. I feel like I'm getting a free masterclass on sales right now, so thank you for that. But also, I think for a lot of folks, it can be really easy to, and I'm speaking from my own experience, but I'm sure a lot of people listening will relate to this, where when that rejection comes, and even if it's a silent rejection, it's easy to internalize that and be like, well, that's a rejection of me and the thing that I was pitching. Yeah. But what you're suggesting, and feel free to interrupt me and course correct me here, it's almost like when that rejection comes for you, you think, well, why possibly? Yeah. Why for them? And you get curious and like, well, how do I then figure out what they're going through and then follow that path so that eventually I can be there whenever they would say yes. And you're kind of following that path and not just saying, oh, well, they rejected me, therefore, screw them. And I had a big thing, you don't take it personally, but you're thinking, like you said, empathy. What's going on in their world where they might say no. And then you learn more about their world. You keep kind of following that thread. And then eventually you say, that's the thing that we have in common. That's the thing we can relate to. And it's really not anything about you or what it was you were selling, whether that's guesting on a podcast or knives or whatnot, but it's how do I follow their journey and then be there to help them, which I got to admit, I don't think I've ever chased anything for 6 years or anybody. So I appreciate that dedication. I got to ask you, why would you be willing, or why were you willing to chase Jeff Hoffman for 6 years to be on your show?
Because I felt like he would add a lot of value, given there's an obvious draw of just the professional influence, right? This guy's a billionaire. He's a tech founder. He's like all these things that are like the immediate, like, like, that, folks normally, attract to. What I was really attracted to was the entrepreneurship, like how driven he is. And because he has the capacity, right? He has a capacity to do this kind of stuff at scale. And he's doing these things in areas that people would normally not reach out to build infrastructure, to build, an environment that's conducive for that. So I felt that for me, that was the definition and the manifestation of meaningful work, for entrepreneurship, and for folks that are trying to, get access to these things. I think a lot of people in my community are kind of entrepreneurially minded, and so they would get a lot of value from somebody who is doing this kind of stuff, at scale.
Mhm.
So that was, that was that. And to your point, man, as far as people are selfish, like at the end of the day, folks are selfish, but you you um you show yourself as even more egotistical when you think that somebody rejects you and it's automatically about you. It's like they don't know you, like they don't care about, like, for you to think that somebody's thinking about you that much that they're rejecting your podcast because they don't like you as a person when you've never met.
Because of
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Like, bro, they don't. And so that's for me, it's a very prideful way to go around life, to say that these people are rejecting me for me. Don't they know who I am, or they do know who I am and therefore they rejected me because of it, versus taking yourself out of it and esteeming them and their situation on a higher pedestal. Like, okay, so what is it that you're going through? There was one lady that I wanted to invite to be on I had a celebration of meaningful work, like the year of my birthday, when we've been doing a year of meaningful work. And I reached out to her. She has a large following. She has a lot of stuff around, that I think resonated with this. And and she said no. And I was asking why, and she was talking a little bit about, I want to make sure that this is meaningful for my market, and we have to have X, like we're really going to have like 20 people at the event, and she's like, I normally do these things for like 5,000 people, or this and this and that, and so I could have taken that as a personal slight, like, oh, you're too small, on you're not far along enough, or you're not worth my time. But I had to think about it. I was like, yo, if I'm at a level where I am trying to sell a service or sell a product, or really look at my brand, and see what's the most meaningful use of my 30 minutes or of my hour or what have you, I can understand why, somebody can, think in that way and make those things. And if I get to a point where I'm at 1,000 people or 5,000 people, or my engagement levels are at 100%, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, this is definitely something I want to engage in now. Yeah, then it makes sense. But for me to take it personally and not think from that person's perspective and what would be meaningful and valuable to them, and just be thinking about myself, it's not a
Mhm.
selfless way to engage with the world. And so yeah, that's kind of the insight that I had there.
Yeah. Well, that also seems like, I'm not sure exactly how to word this, but it seems like it requires a great deal of self-awareness.
For sure.
And because I get exactly what you're saying, and I've been in this situation where, somebody has said, well, I typically deal with audiences at this
Mhm.
size, and it's really, really easy for you to turn that into, therefore your audience is too small, therefore you are too small, therefore like that is not a difficult thread to connect, right? But you need to realize that like you said, and I love how you turned that around on, how would I feel if I was in their
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to get the person that's going to have, 100,000 book sales or 500,000 or whatnot, and they don't want to speak to an audience of 20 or 30 or 50 people. And you have to understand that that's just the way that they've been conditioned to view their time. And I love how you just completely flipped that around, and you said it has nothing to do with the size of my reach or my audience or things like that. It has all to do with them. But you still find there are creative ways to find what's valuable to them in that space, because you might be able to say, I may only have 100 people who will show up for this. However, I do have this thing over here that they're interested in. And so I love the creativity in that. And I know we got off on a bit of a tangent here, but you have such a great sales and influence and persuasion background. And something that I've been thinking about a lot for the show lately is trying to persuade people, or trying to give people get people to give themselves the permission to pursue a hobby or a creative endeavor, whether that's a podcast or it's art or it's, selling stuff on eBay, like whatever it is, and give themselves permission to do this thing, knowing that it's out of their comfort zone, knowing that it's not something that they're an immediate expert in. And I think you just help to convey to a lot of people why it's okay to do that, and don't take personal offense if it doesn't work out, or if you try to collaborate with people and they're not there to support you right away. And maybe you get to it eventually, but you don't have to. So thank you for that.
No problem.
I want to ask you, because we definitely need to spend some quality time talking about what is the definition of meaningful work, right? And I'm guessing, projecting maybe a little bit, that there's not one clear, concise definition to meaningful work. However, I would love to ask you if you've seen something that I've seen in the modern workforce, which is, I have this theory that in our generation, maybe, and you and I are I think both right on the cusp of millennial. Maybe we were right there. We're not Gen X, we're not Gen Z, we're Gen, I don't know, something. But I think that our parents' generation did not necessarily prioritize meaning in their work. It was not a priority for them for a lot of reasons. Stability was a priority, and that's totally all well and good. And I don't fault any of them for that. And I think that there's a younger generation that is seeking meaning first. And what I've seen in maybe our generation, and I was born in, the early 80s, is that there might be a common path of X amount of success first, and then you have the space created to find meaning. And that seems to be in conflict with a lot of the younger generation. It seems to be in conflict with the older generation. So I'm curious, what have you seen around the patterns or tendencies in the workforce of when people feel comfortable looking for greater meaning in their work?
So I have taken I've taken April off of social media between the end of our season 2 and the beginning of our season 3 to really focus on defining that and creating tools and resources for our community, the meaningful work community, to start engaging in that. And so in the last few weeks, while I haven't been spending hours scrolling through social media, I've been doing some reading and some researching and things like that, and putting together this framework. And I've been reading a lot about intrinsic motivation. So that kind of the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Whereas previous generations have been kind of motivated by this extrinsic motivation of like what they define success as. Like if you do this enough, you'll make enough money, and then you do this enough and you'll make more money, then you can retire. And you kind of have those external factors of why you do the work that you do. You don't necessarily have to like it, but you'll go work at the factory, make your money, retire. You'll go, in the military, you'll serve your time, you'll get this nice little package, you come out. So you have these things that are more extrinsically motivating factors. And, also thinking about the mindset that we're moving on as a generation, there's like this thing called like the socialized mind, and then the self-aware mind, and then like the self-authored mind. And so as you kind of move through these levels of what motivates folks and how folks are developing from a mental complexity standpoint of doing things that everybody else thinks is okay, or doing things that are externally motivating, this modern age of folks would define meaningful work. And I'll read it out here because I've literally just wrote it. So meaningful work as an experience in having autonomy, engaging in activities that challenge you in a way where you seek mastery, and doing things that have broader positive impact, all the while creating substantive relationships. So you have some tenets there. And so in meaningful work, we have those tenets as permission, perfection, purpose, and people. And so those are like the tenets, like when you have the autonomy, you have the say so in how you do your work, where you do your work, with whom you do your work. When folks have that freedom, everybody wants freedom. America left England because they wanted freedom, right? Like we had this whole civil rights situation because, African Americans wanted freedom. So freedom,
That's what I
that's
hear.
what,
Yeah.
so freedom is a big part of the human condition. And so when you can have that autonomy and freedom and governance of how you do what you do, where you do what you do, and with whom you do what you do, you're going to start experiencing meaningful work. And when you have the opportunity to master something that you're super excited about or energizes you, and you can master that, like for me, reaching out to folks, kind of like that sales process, like that energizes me. And the more I can get better and better and better at that, I can do that without getting paid. Like that's just energy for me. And then having that bigger impact, right? It said we're coming up to a time, probably like it was like 20, it was either 2019, no, in like the late 2010s, we were going to have more 65-year-olds like in the world, like the boomers kind of coming into this retirement age. And research has shown that when folks get to this 65-year-old area, they start thinking about purpose. And that's when you start seeing folks, instead of retiring, they're going back to do more purpose-driven work. So they're opening up foundations, or they're going back to volunteer, or they're doing all these things because now they're kind of taking stock of their life and saying, okay, I've amassed all this money, I've retired, but like, what did I actually do? And so you have this huge kind of purpose generation that folks are starting to think about that. And that is native to the newer generation. Like they're coming into it late, and folks like in the younger generations, millennials, Gen Y, Gen X, or not Gen X, millennials and Gen Z, they come in with a purpose mindset. Like they want to do something bigger and greater because
they've got it built in from the beginning, right? Like from the beginning.
Because the world is already connected. Back then, the baby boomers, if you lived in Manhattan, you only lived in Manhattan. If you lived in Podunk Town, but now you live in South Africa, you live in Iceland, because of the social media, like everybody is so interconnected, so you can see the type of impact that goes around the world. So folks come in with that sense of having broader purpose, broader impact. So for me, what I'm seeing is that if you can look at the work that you do and saying that meaningful work can either be a destination, like, hey, I want to land in a role where I have autonomy, mastery, purpose, and relationships. My role as a vice president of XYZ should have all these things in the role. So meaningful work can be a destination, or meaningful work can be a pursuit, meaning that as you're looking at life, as you're looking at different types of work, you're looking at it from the lens of autonomy, mastery, purpose, and relationships. So in anywhere that you're going, you can identify meaningful work situations or know what meaningful work looks like for you in those situations. And we ideally hope to help folks either get on that path from a pursuit standpoint or identify the destination that would provide those meaningful work principles for them.
That's fantastic. To state the obvious here. I love all of it because I think that is so true and so accurate. And again, I know I'm editorializing a little bit here while also trying to be, the objective third party. But you just kind of laid it out. Like, and I think that provides people with at least two paths, right? Of I can get to a destination where I can be more impactful and have more meaning in my work, or I can look for the meaning, what I might call fulfillment, along that path, which will keep me going forward, but also guide me if I want to take a different path, or if I want to make a different decision. And that's beautiful because you have both choices. You have here's the goal I'm going for, which type A personality, I'm the kind of person who may be like, I'm going to get to there and then we're going to create some meaning. Or it might be the person who's like along the way, maybe I'm, at Wendy's serving at the counter, but I'm going to be the best damn provider of joy to people who are getting food at Wendy's possible.
Exactly.
And that's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's beautiful. So I'm going to ask a really broad question. So just throw out whatever comes to mind here. But you obviously have talked with a lot of people, and you know a lot of people, and you're connected with a lot of great minds around the future of work. What are some things that you think the future holds for meaningful work? Like how do you see things changing maybe from where they are now, or just improving, maybe iteratively or incrementally? And what are some trends that you see that will allow us all, whether we're lawyers or teachers or doctors or janitors, that will help to make work more meaningful or help us to find more meaning in our work?
Yeah, I think from both standpoints, I think from a candidate standpoint of folks that are looking for work, they are going to be a lot more picky in the organizations that they align themselves to based on how much perceived meaningfulness, that organization is either giving off as a brand or communicating by way of the opportunity that folks are, because there are so many ways to make money these days. Like, I don't have to go and get a job at GE, to make, I can be a gig worker and make just as much as an entry level person in a regular organization. I can, get a certificate for technology and, do a boot camp or whatever, and, learn how to code and build my own business and sell, widgets. Like, there's so many ways to make a living these days. I can open up a YouTube channel and just be talking to folks and get folks to pay me to, advertise or what have you. So there's a lot less draw to say like, oh, I have to go work in this organization. So when they are making that choice, they want it to be something that is a good use of their time, something that gives them the freedom, something that gives them the mastery, something that gives them the development and all that thing. So from a candidate perspective, they're going to be looking through that lens when they're looking at the organization. Organizations are also going to start shifting their cultures to be ones that allow for more of those things. We saw autonomy play a big role or emerge in the last year, given COVID, where we thought you had to be in an office to get work done. Now we see that you can actually get higher productivity and higher performance when folks are given the freedom to choose where they work. They don't have to be butts in seats. They can be on an island. They can be at home. They could be at their baseball practice. They can be all these places, and you've given them the
and in less time.
And in less time, right? Or in more time. Some folks were restricted by an 8-hour day. Some folks now can roll out of bed and do work and then be in bed all day and still be working at midnight and whatever. Like you still get the job, done. So autonomy has improved, performance and productivity in a lot of places. Now it's about how do we, be more proactive. That was more of a reactive stance because of a pandemic. Now organizations are going to be more proactive. How do we create a culture of autonomy? How do we create a culture of mastery? And that's really where they're going to want to start branding themselves. So I think that's really going to be some key things to look out for. And folks are going to have multiple roles. Like, it's not just going to be you're an employee of this thing. Folks are going to be pan positional, call it pan positional. They can be a project manager here. They can be a, gig worker over here. They can be a podcast person over here. So you're not tied down to your corporate position. You can have multiple positions at the same time and still get, the same number of same level of output.
That is fascinating, by the way. It's fascinating for many reasons, but also because we could probably talk for another hour or 2 or 3 or 6
about from that. 3 to 6
because let's say I got a lot of staying power. No, but I've been thinking a lot lately about the workforce and how the workforce is organized, and how generally speaking, a W-2 employee may not be a W-2 employee in the future, but if you are a great project manager at company A, but they go through a period where they don't need you 40 hours a week, maybe they need you 10, instead of you getting downsized or laid off, like how is there a share between company A and then company B or C who also needs your talents, not just as a project manager, but like you said, as a podcaster, as a developer, as a what have you. I foresee, and I have no idea what it looks like because I'm really dumb when it comes to these sorts of areas, but what does that look like to where companies start to maybe share in the, I hate to say burden because it sounds negative, but I know what it's like to be an employer. When you employ people, there is a tax burden, there's a cost burden, there's all these other things. But how does that start to maybe shift whenever you've got really talented people that at certain times don't need to be full-time in a certain organization? So like I said, we could probably talk about that ad nauseum until you're like, Sean, leave me the hell alone.
That's a whole industry by itself. Like that shared service agency kind of consultancy type of model is I mean, that you're right. I think that's definitely there's a lean towards that, or the need, right? We might not be leaning there, but there's definitely a need, and maybe some organizations will pick up on it sooner than others. And I think those guys are going to figure it out and win for sure.
Especially like when it's multi-talented people like yourself, like you can coach leaders, you can do project management, you can do sales, and you're just one example, right? But how do you get the most for your organization, which is not a selfish thing.
Yeah.
But how do you do that without having to hire somebody full time or having to go to Upwork, which, I think you and I talked about. There's a study that like only 35% of Upwork projects actually succeed.
Yeah.
But how do you get talented people to benefit everything you need in your organization and another? So that's amazing. Well, I know we're running up on time, and I want to be respectful of your time. And again, there will be 6 more hours of this conversation.
Part 2, part 3, part 6, part 7. Yeah, the Sean and Tim saga.
Zack Snyder will be jealous. Zack Snyder will be jealous of the Sean and Tim cut of this conversation. Yeah, sounds like a Cartoon Network show. It's all good.
I love it.
But what would you leave folks with who are, they're out in the working world right now? Maybe they've got a job. Maybe they're a little fearful for what's in the future. They're not quite sure what's going on, but they want to prepare themselves, and they want to also not just survive, but they want to do meaningful work. What would you recommend to them?
Yeah, I think it starts off with, you mentioned something earlier, and I want to come back to it, which is permission. Permission to, I think you were talking about permission to do hobbies or do things that are outside of your comfort zone. I recently published a short little article with somebody that I met on LinkedIn, Dr. Jessica Mohammed, and we were talking about, it's titled The Paradox of Permission. And she shared that permission starts with ownership, right? Ownership and autonomy. Like, you can't give permission to something that you don't have ownership or autonomy over, right? So as an individual, right, like I can't just, spend the company, I can't just expense everything that I use because I don't have ownership of the company's money. I have to ask my manager for permission. Hey, can I expense this trip? It's like, yes, you can expense it, because I have to ask. She's the one that owns the budget. She's the one that owns, what can be applied. So you have to have that ownership. And so for individuals who are struggling with giving themselves permission to jump into something or pursue something or bet on themselves or stop playing small or what have you, you have to get a sense of ownership of what your strengths are. Like, really, really dig in and figure out, hey, what are my strengths? What are the things that energize me? What are the things that stretch me? What are the, do that inner work of finding, ownership of what those things are. Because once you get the ownership, then you can now give yourself permissions. Okay, so now that I know that I am really energized by pursuing contacts and relationships, I know that I own that. I now give myself permission to go and ask for billionaire contacts. I now give myself permission to go and ask for major influencers. I now give myself permissions to, talk to these folks that I probably normally wouldn't have talked to, because I know that kind of pursuit gives me energy, right? And so I would just encourage folks to do the work of figuring out what are the things that give you energy, what are your values, if it's relationships, if it's spirituality, if it's family, whatever. Like, you figure out what those things are, and then you can then give yourself permission to pursue things in that lane that might stretch you a little bit, but you will start to experience meaningful work once you start making those little itty bitty steps.
That's beautiful. That's so profound, and I love it. Thank you for sharing exactly what you just shared. It seems like that ownership and that self-awareness and like really owning that gives you permission to be bold
100%.
And to do things that maybe would scare you a little bit otherwise. And so it sounds like ownership unlocks that courage. So thank you for sharing that, Tim. Well, Tim, as we're about to wrap up here, where can folks find you online? I feel like they should probably be following you more than they're following me. So I'm just going to let them go over and start to, trickle into your social feed. Even if they leave me behind, because you're putting things so well.
Bring Sean along. He's here for the ride. Let's go.
Yeah, I got nothing going on. It's fine. Where can folks connect with you online? Where are the best places for them to find you and your work?
So the website, mrmeaningfulwork.com. You can find what we're doing, kind of the idea of meaningful work, and you can look at the old shows, the previous episodes of the Late Afternoon Show. You can join our mailing list, where we'll be providing updates on the Meaningful Work Matrix. So what I described before, which is still kind of in beta, that permission, perfection, purpose, and people, where you fit on that Meaningful Work Matrix. You can find that on mrmeaningfulwork.com. Very active on LinkedIn, just Tim Olaore, Olaore, on LinkedIn, and Twitter and Instagram. It's Mr. Meaningful Work, just without the O on the work. So Mr. Meaningful Work without the O on Twitter and Instagram, and then just my name on YouTube and on LinkedIn, but probably most importantly, mrmeaningfulwork.com. And we'll soon have our podcast launching as well on Spotify and Apple Music, which is the Late Afternoon Show, but more modified for audio only versus the video format.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tim Olaore. Like I said, this is probably part one of, N. One to N, as an engineer would say. Yeah. 1 to N episodes of conversations we're going to have. Why not? If we're gonna solve this problem, we're probably going to be talking about this forever. Until we found the last single person to find them and help them find their own meaningful work. So once again, if you've been confused, I'm Sean speaking right now. Tim is the other gentleman. I know that could be some confusion, but until next time on the Rebase Show, the show for profession with purpose, I'm Sean. Signing off. Cheers. Hey, it's Sean again. I know you thought that was the end of the episode, but just when you thought you were out, we pulled you back in. Just for a minute though, with a few final reminders as we wrap up our time today. First, if you haven't already subscribed, what are you waiting for? By subscribing to the show, you'll get access to every amazing conversation and solo episode in the archives. Everything from the future of work, to going into the business of you, to dealing with stress when you're feeling overwhelmed, and you'll automatically get every new episode right when it gets released. And I don't need to tell you how to do this because you're a podcast listener, and you're listening to this show, so you're obviously awesome. Now, if you are enjoying the show, then all I want for Christmas is your 5-star rating and review. And I've made it even easier for you to do so. Just tap the link in the show notes or go to ratethispodcast.com/rebase. Now, every new rating and review makes me feel like the popular girl in school. But more importantly, the podcasts with great reviews are the ones that get featured on podcast platforms. So more people will discover the show and we can continue to grow this movement of profession with purpose. And last but not least, if you enjoyed this episode, and if you're not driving right now or flying a helicopter or performing life or death surgery, then please screenshot the episode and tag me on Instagram at RebaseHQ. Doing just one of these things will absolutely make my day. If you do all three, well, let's just say I'll owe you a huge hug and a high five the next time I see you. I sincerely appreciate each and every one of you who's tuning into the show every week and who's joined the Profession with Purpose movement. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.